My son came home from a 5-year military deployment, hoping to surprise me. But when he walked through that front door, he didn't find his mother. He found a stranger scrubbing floors, a prisoner in her own home. The betrayal? It ran deeper than I could have ever imagined. I heard the front door open, but I didn't dare stop scrubbing. The last time I hesitated, my phone was gone for 3 days. My lungs burned with bleach, my joints screamed, and my palms were raw from the endless chores. I just kept wiping the same clean spot on the floor, over and over, because that's what they expected. That's what kept the house quiet. But the moment that door clicked shut, the air itself shifted. It felt sharp, electric, dangerous. A hush fell over the living room, like the very walls were holding their breath. And then I heard it, a voice I hadn't heard in 5 agonizing years. Ma! It shouldn't have sounded so broken. My hand froze mid-wipe. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I saw stars. Slowly, reluctantly, I turned, dreading the look I knew I'd find on his face. There he was, Thaddeus, standing in the doorway in his full uniform, that heavy deployment duffel still slung over his shoulder, dust from foreign lands clinging to his boots. He hadn't even fully stepped inside before his eyes found me, kneeling there, trembling, wearing an apron that wasn't mine, holding a rag that certainly wasn't either. The proud smile he'd come home with, it just crumpled, right there, in front of me. Mom, is this you? It wasn't a question. It was a raw, gaping wound. Behind him, the laughter from the living room died, replaced by an unnerving silence. His wife's mother stopped chewing. Her brother slowly lowered the remote. And then his wife, Vanessa, stepped out of the kitchen, clutching a glass of sweet tea. She looked like she'd been caught trespassing, because she had. You weren't supposed to be back yet, she stammered, her voice thin with panic. Thaddeus didn't blink. He didn't even acknowledge her. His eyes were glued to me, my knees on their hardwood floor, my trembling hands, the faint burn on my wrist from a pot I wasn't allowed to cook with, unless it was for them. Something inside him just snapped, without a single sound. What is this? He whispered, his voice barely audible. My lips parted, but a wave of humiliation washed over me, so fast, so thick, that the words drowned before they could reach the air. Her mother, though, scoffed loudly. Lord, don't start nothing. She likes doing chores. Helps her feel useful. Useful, as if I were a piece of furniture, an appliance. The look that crossed Thaddeus's face in that moment wasn't born of war or training. It was the look of a son witnessing a violation so profound, he knew he'd never unsee it. He knelt beside me, gently taking my hand, his gaze searching, trying to comprehend the damage, the blunt red marks, my uncontrollable shaking, the silent tears already drying on my chin. Ma, he breathed, his voice ragged. Who did this to you? I couldn't answer. Shame speaks slower than truth, you know? But watching me, utterly unable to speak, something shifted in my son. An old, fierce protectiveness roared awake within him. If you're watching this right now, I'd love to know what country you're tuning in from. Because what happened next? It shouldn't happen to any mother, anywhere. Thaddeus rose to his full height, his shoulders rigid, breathing like he was fighting something primal inside himself. Mom, he said, his voice now low, steady, and dangerously cold. Get your things. Vanessa rushed forward. Thad, wait. Let's talk. He didn't turn. He didn't blink. He didn't soften. Get your things. Her family on the couch suddenly straightened, fear flickering in their eyes for the first time. They'd never seen him like this. They'd never seen what happened when someone dared to touch his mother's dignity. My legs were shaking so badly I could barely stand. He reached for me, held me steady. Then, a shadow moved in the hallway. A figure stepped forward, someone who had no business being in my home at all. The moment Thaddeus saw who it was, every last ounce of mercy vanished from his face. My son didn't ask permission to take me out of that house. He moved like a man who had already made his decision, and the rest of them were just background noise. The man in the hallway was Riek, his wife's brother, wiping grease off his fingers onto his jeans, acting like he owned the place. He planted himself near the doorway, shoulders squared, eyes narrowed at Thaddeus. "Hey man," he puffed out, "ain't nobody putting their hands on her. You're doing the most. Calm down." Thaddeus didn't even glance at him. His gaze stayed fixed on me, like a soldier evacuating someone from a war zone. He took my elbow, gentle but firm. "Go to your room, Mama," he said softly. "Pack whatever you can carry. Now." My legs hesitated, even before my mind did. For months, every step I took in that house felt like it needed approval. I'd learned to ask, "Can I go lie down? Is it okay if I make some tea?" Standing up without waiting for someone else's face to give permission, it just felt wrong. "Thad, you're being disrespectful." Vanessa snapped, walking closer. She smelled like MY lotion, using MY things, standing on MY floor in MY house, talking as if I was the one out of place. "You don't just snatch your mother out like that. We've been taking care of her." Those words, they twisted something inside me. Taking care. I'd heard that phrase far too many times. Thaddeus finally turned his head, just enough to look at her. His voice remained unnervingly calm. "You've said enough for today." Her mother rose from the couch then, slow and deeply offended. "I don't know who you think you're talking to, boy." He cut his eyes toward her, and for a terrifying moment, I saw the man he'd had to become out there in the world. Not my little boy, not the son I watched play ball in the street. This was a man who'd seen ugly things, a man who learned to move through them with stillness, not noise. "With respect," he said, "this conversation doesn't involve you anymore." The room thickened with tension. No one here was used to him taking up this kind of space. They were used to him being a voice on a phone line. Easy to talk around. Easy to lie to. My heart hammered. "It's okay," I murmured, out of sheer habit. "We don't have to." He looked back at me quickly. "Mima, just that." And somehow, it meant no more protecting them at your own expense. My hand shaking, I went to my room. I pulled a small travel bag from under the bed. It was already half-packed. I hadn't even realized I'd been doing it over the past few weeks. Folding a towel here, a dress there, tucking away my blood pressure pills. Somewhere deep inside, I'd been waiting for a day that felt like an exit. By the time I came back down the hall, the air was practically buzzing. Vanessa stood with her arms tight across her chest, eyes bright with raw anger. Her brother hovered near the door, still blocking it, more out of pride than any real purpose. Her mother muttered under her breath, shaking her head as if he'd just come to his senses. Thaddeus stepped between me and all of them, took the bag from my hand, and opened the front door. Sunlight spilled in, like the truth. "Don't you walk out that door with her," Vanessa warned, her voice desperate. "If you leave like this, don't bother coming back." He paused, just long enough to turn his head toward her. There was no rage on his face, no pleading, no confusion. Just a tired, stark clarity. "I'm not leaving," he said. "I'm taking my mother home." He guided me out to the car like I was made of glass. My legs felt heavy, my lungs tight. I couldn't bring myself to look back at the house. I was scared if I did, they'd convince me to stay, the way they always did, with guilt and raised voices, and talk about me ruining things. The car door closed with a soft thump that felt like a door closing on an entire chapter of my life. He set my bag on the back seat, got in, and started the engine. We drove in silence at first. The neighborhood slid by. The same cracked sidewalks, the same leaning mailboxes, the same sycamore tree my husband used to park under when he came home from work. Everything outside looked normal. Everything inside me, though, was shattered. My hands were folded in my lap, fingers curled tight so he wouldn't see them shaking. "Are you okay?" he asked eventually, his eyes still on the road. I swallowed. The words wouldn't form. The shame was a thick, heavy, sour knot on my tongue. Not shame for what they did. Shame for what I'd allowed to happen, because I was so tired, so alone, and so utterly terrified of being a burden. My face crumpled before I could stop it. Tears slid down, quiet and hot. I pressed my knuckles to my mouth, but a broken little breath still escaped. He reached across the console and rested his hand on mine, just sat it there, warm and steady, like he used to when he was a boy, climbing into my bed after a nightmare. "You should have called me, Mama," he whispered. "You should have told me something was wrong." I stared straight ahead, watching the traffic lights blur into streaks of color. My voice came out small, like it had been kept in a dark place for too long. "They never let me call you." He drove until the houses thinned out and the streets grew quiet, until the noise of that neighborhood and that front door felt far enough behind us that I could finally breathe without tasting them in the air. We ended up at a small roadside motel, the kind with doors that opened straight to the parking lot and a faded vacancy sign buzzing in the window. He parked close to the room, like he was planning a quick escape if he had to. He checked us in without asking my opinion, then helped me out of the car as if I were older than I'd felt yesterday. Grief ages you. Shame finishes the job. The room smelled of cleaning fluid and old air conditioning. One bed, one small table, heavy curtains. He put my bag down gently by the chair. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands folded so tight my fingers hurt. He stood for a while, his back to me, hands on his hips, staring at the wall as if it held all the answers. When he turned around, the anger from the house was gone. This was worse. This was the part where a child realizes their parent isn't as strong as they thought. "How long has it been like that?" he asked quietly. No shouting, no accusations. That hurt more than anything. I licked my lips, searching for a way to make it sound smaller, less ugly. It didn't start that way. He pulled the chair up in front of me and sat, his knees close enough to touch mine. His uniform looked too stiff for this little room. "I need you to tell me everything, Ma. Don't protect nobody. Not this time." I looked at his hands. Those same hands that once brought me finger paintings and broken Lego men, now scarred and steady. I'd spent 5 years praying over those hands, asking God to bring him home safe from strangers. It never once crossed my mind that I should have been praying about my own blood instead. "It got worse after your daddy passed," I said finally. "At first, everyone just showed up. Grief brings casseroles and company. For a while, the house was full of people, all talking too loud, hugging too hard, promising to check in. They did, until they didn't. Most of them faded like background noise, except one. Rick," I continued. "He started coming by more. Almost every day. Said he didn't want me sitting in the house alone. He'd bring groceries, fix little things around the place. He'd sit in your daddy's chair and talk about how we had to pull together now that it was just us." A small, sad smile tugged at my mouth, remembering those early visits. I'd held onto them longer than I should have. He kept saying, "You had your own life, your own battle. Didn't want me bothering you with anything small, Dad." Thaddeus flinched. "He told you not to call me." "He said soldiers need quiet," I murmured. "Said I'd make you worry. Said you had enough on your head without me adding my little aches and pains." I shrugged, my eyes burning. It sounded kind, like he was protecting you. But manipulation doesn't show up with a knife in its hand. It comes with flowers and concern. And that's what makes it so effective. Then he started talking about help. Said I shouldn't be cleaning, lifting, cooking so much. Said there were people willing to step in so I could rest. He didn't have to name them. We both saw the couch, the chicken bones, the way they didn't move their feet when I swept. I nodded. He brought them one weekend. Said they were your wife's people, and they just needed a place to land for a while. I didn't think it was permanent. Just a visit. I made up the guest room. I cooked. I smiled. That's what mothers do. We make room. He leaned forward. When did you stop having a say? I swallowed hard. It wasn't one day. It was little things. Them staying another week, then another. They're things in my kitchen cabinets. Him saying, "Ma, let them handle that. You go sit down." Every time I tried to fuss, they'd look at each other like I was being ungrateful. And your brother would say, "We're family. You don't want to run family off, do you?" I twisted my fingers together, remembering that first time I felt like a guest in my own living room. Then he changed the locks one day. Said it was for safety. I didn't ask who else got a key. Thaddeus's eyes sharpened. "Ma, who did he give keys to?" I lifted my gaze to his. This was the part I'd been dragging behind me like a chain, too ashamed to admit I'd trusted the wrong child. Your brother, he gave them the keys. The words sat between us, heavy and sharp. Your brother gave them the keys. Thaddeus leaned back in the chair, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor as if he could see his way back through the months he'd been gone. His jaw worked, muscles jumping under the skin. He didn't shout. That scared me more than any rage would have. When he first started coming around, I said, my voice low, it felt like a blessing. Both my boys busy with their lives. And there he was, checking in on his mama. He'd say, you know I got you. I'm not going to let nothing happen to you. I could still hear that steady tone he used, the same one he put on when he talked about work, about reports and procedures, and how folks always tried to get over, but he saw through them. He carried that same confidence into my living room, like it was another case to manage. Only this time, the person he was managing was me. He made it sound like protection, I continued. Said he knew how people knocked on doors, scammed widows, tried to trick them out of what they had. He'd talk about ladies at his job who lost everything because they trusted the wrong person. And he'd look at me and say, not you, Ma. I'm on top of it. Thaddeus rubbed his hand down his face, slow. So, you believed him? I wanted to, I admitted. He spoke like he knew things I didn't, like he'd seen all the angles, and I was tired of making decisions alone. Every time I hesitated, he'd sigh that little sigh and say, Ma, this is why folks get hurt. They drag their feet. Let me help you. Help. That word had become a chain. At first, it was little stuff. My mail, he said, looked important. Phone calls, he stayed on instead of me. He'd sit at the table with papers spread out, talking about how certain bills needed to be handled, how your daddy had left things messy in the system. If I asked anything, he'd say, you don't need the stress of all this detail. That's what I'm here for. The Motel A conditioner hummed in the corner, blowing out air that felt too cold for how hot my face had gotten. I twisted my fingers in the bedspread, my eyes on the faded pattern so I wouldn't have to see the disappointment in my son's face. He started speaking like there was always some rule I didn't know, some policy, some form. He'd say, Ma, the way things work now, you can't just be out here doing what you want with the house. They'll come for you. Let me put your mind at ease. Thaddeus's mouth flattened, and letting strangers move in was supposed to be easing your mind. He eased his own, I said softly, but he didn't do it all at once. They came for a weekend at first. Then he said they were transitioning and had nowhere else to go. If I looked uneasy, he'd remind me of all the horror stories he'd seen. People ending up in wise situations because they turned down good folk trying to help Dad. Good folk, Thaddeus repeated, bitter. He carried himself like somebody who knew what could happen if I didn't listen, I said. When I asked him about the locks, he didn't say, I don't trust you. He said, I don't trust what can happen out there. If something goes wrong, you know they call me first. Let me set things up right. I remembered that day so clearly. The new key, cold in my palm, his hand over mine, his eyes steady. He told me there were liabilities, I said, stumbling over the word he'd used so often. Said if somebody slipped on the porch or claimed something against the house, I could be ruined. He made it sound like he was shielding me from the big bad world. Thaddeus looked up then, his eyes dark, and all the while, he was the one letting the wolf in. My chest tightened. I didn't see it that way, I whispered. When I got overwhelmed, he'd pat my hand and say, Ma, I deal with this kind of thing all the time. This is what I do. Trust me. And when I hesitated about them staying, he'd shake his head and say, you always soft. You always worry about everybody but yourself. For once, let me handle it. I wiped a tear away with the heel of my hand. Every boundary I tried to set, he stepped over with that same calm voice. Like I was a child being stubborn, and he was the one with sense. Thaddeus sat back, arms crossed now, staring at me with a hurt I couldn't mother away. He used you, he said, and he used my name to do it. I felt that like a blade, because that was the part one hadn't said yet. The part that tasted the worst. I drew in a breath that shook. When I got nervous about how crowded the house felt, about them treating my things like theirs, I told him it didn't sit right with me. I said, I didn't think you'd like coming home to all that. I lifted my eyes to meet my son's. He looked me dead in my face. I said, my voice breaking. And he said, you wanted things this way. Saying those words out loud, you wanted things this way, was like pushing a stone off a ledge. There was no pulling it back once it started falling. Thaddeus didn't move at first. He just stared at me, like he was trying to see not the mother he left, but the woman who'd been living in the shadow of his brother's voice all this time. His nostrils flared once. His hand closed into a fist on his knee, then slowly opened again, as if he was reminding himself to stay in control. So he used my name, he said quietly. He used my uniform and my absence, and he used your trust in him to move them into that house. I nodded, shame heavy in my chest. He said you were busy serving your country, and that the least he could do was handle things here. Every time I pushed back, he'd say, you know how your baby brother is. He don't want you stressed, Ma. I'm just doing what he would do if he was here. Thaddeus's eyes hardened in a way I hadn't seen before. The boy I raised would have cried or walked off to cool down. The man in front of me turned very still, controlled, purposeful. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and laid it flat in his palm for a second, breathing slow, like he was lining himself up with something he'd trained for. Ma, he said, his voice low and steady. What they did to you, it's not just wrong. It's not just family drama. It's abuse. And the fact that he's in uniform while he's doing it. He shook his head. That changes everything. Fear fluttered up in me at the word abuse. It sounded so official, so big, bigger than just me scrubbing floors and biting my tongue. Thad, maybe we should just let it be for now. You just got home. I don't want to cause trouble at your job. His eyes snapped to mine. This is trouble at my job, he said. They don't get to break my mother and hide behind a badge in my deployment. That's not how this works. He didn't pace, didn't rant. He scrolled through his contacts with a sure thumb, tapped a number, and put the phone on speaker. A ring. Another. Then a clear, professional voice answered. Legal Assistance Office. This is Captain Willis. How can I help you today? Thaddeus straightened in the chair. Pure instinct. His tone shifted into something official, yet deeply personal. My name is Staff Sergeant Thaddeus Hollowman. I just returned from deployment. I need to report a situation involving my mother, elder abuse, possible financial coercion, and a family member in civilian law enforcement. Hearing it laid out like that made my stomach twist. Elder abuse, coercion, all those big words landing on my small, tired life. The woman on the phone didn't gasp, didn't dramatize. Her voice stayed even. All right, Sergeant Hollowman. Is your mother currently safe and away from the individuals involved? He glanced at me. I folded my hands tighter, as if I could make myself worthy of being called safe. Yes, he said. She's with me in a motel off base. The individuals are at her house, where they've been living. She's been acting as their housekeeper in the home she owns. Understood, she replied. I'm going to ask you some questions so we can determine the best next steps. I'll need your mother's age, her relationship to the alleged abusers, and a general timeline of when this began. He answered each thing calmly, like he was reading from a file he'd already written in his mind. Her age, widow, eldest son, in-laws by marriage, the months after my husband died, the gradual shift. Has there been any physical harm? She asked. Or threats if she tried to leave or contact you? I shook my head, then stopped, realizing she couldn't see me. No beatings, I said softly. But they took my phone. They watched where I walked. Anytime I tried to talk about calling my son, they tell me I was being dramatic. Said I'd ruin their marriage and stress him for nothing. The captain listened. I could hear keys clicking lightly on her end. But she never rushed us. That still qualifies as isolation and control, she said. Thank you for sharing that. My throat tightened. Being believed by a stranger felt almost unreal. Sergeant, she continued, here's what we can do. First, I recommend you document everything you can remember. Names, dates, what was said, any documents your mother was asked to sign. Second, I'm going to connect you with our special victim legal counsel and provide contact information for local adult protective services. We can coordinate with civilian authorities regarding the family member in law enforcement, so you're not trying to navigate that alone. Thaddeus nodded even though she couldn't see him. Yes. I also strongly advise, she added, that you do not return to the house alone or engage in any confrontation without a plan. Emotions are high, and with another party in law enforcement, things can escalate quickly. Let's do this methodically. That word, methodically, settled something inside me. This wasn't a scene from a movie. This was a process, steps, people who knew what to do. I'll email you a list of what to gather and the language to use when contacting APS and local investigators, she said. You're doing the right thing bringing this forward. We take it very seriously. Thank you, he said. When he hung up, the room felt different. Not lighter, but firmer, like the floor had shifted from sand to concrete. He looked at me, his eyes clear in a way I hadn't seen since he first walked through that front door. Ma, he said quietly, we're not just leaving that house. We're going to prove what they did inside it. By the way, if you're still with me on this unbelievable journey, make sure to hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what else is coming. By morning, the motel room felt too small for the sheer weight of everything we now knew. Thin, gray light seeped through the cheap curtains as I watched my son read and reread the legal officer's email on his phone. He'd shed his uniform shirt, sitting there in his undershirt and cargo pants, still looking every bit a man on duty. Only now, his mission was me. He handed me the phone. The message was plain, utterly undramatic, just a stock list, document living conditions. Photograph injuries or signs of neglect. Identify any financial papers signed under pressure. Record statements only if safe to do so. Do not destroy or alter anything you find. No big words. No promises of instant justice. Just steps. Ma, he said, sitting on the edge of the bed. I need to go back to the house. That sentence sliced right through the tiny bubble of safety I'd built in my mind overnight. I clutched the blanket. Why? You already saw how they treat me. Isn't that enough? He shook his head slowly. I believe you, Ma. But believing and proving aren't the same thing. Right now, it's just our word versus theirs. And you know who they have on their side. He didn't have to say Riek's name. It hung heavy between us anyway. The lady from legal said, the more we can show, the harder it'll be for them to twist it, he continued. I'm not going to start a fight. I'm going to gather proof. Quiet. Careful. I hated that he was right. Hated that in our own family, truth alone wasn't enough. We had to weigh it down with pictures and papers and the right kind of words. What if they tried to do something? I asked, a tremor in my voice. Your brother doesn't like being questioned. You know how his face changes when someone tells him no. Thaddeus's eyes softened. I know, Ma, he said. That's why I'm not walking in there as your son who just found out. I'm walking in like I did yesterday. But this time, I'm listening for everything, watching everything. My phone will stay in my hand. I'll ask the kind of questions that sound harmless, but aren't. He held up the phone, tapping the screen. Camera works fine. So does the voice recorder. A fresh wave of unease washed over me. Thad, I don't want you dragged into no mess. I'm already in it, he replied, his voice firm. They pulled me into it the minute they used my name to fool you. He stood and moved around the room with purpose, checking his wallet, his ID, his keys. He tucked a small notebook into his pocket, the same kind he used overseas to jot down coordinates and reminders. Now, it would hold the details of my humiliation. Here's what I'm going to do, he said, thinking aloud. I'll act like I just needed to cool off last night. I'll apologize for overreacting. I'll let them talk. Folks like that always want to explain themselves. While they talk, I'll record. While they walk around that house like they own it, I'll take pictures. Any paperwork lying around, I'll photograph that, too. I pictured him back in those rooms, surrounded by the same people who'd watched me kneel on my own floor. Anger flared, but beneath it was a smaller, sharper shame. I don't know what all they had me sign, I admitted, my voice low. Sometimes it was after a long day. Sometimes they'd crowd around me, Him talking fast, her putting the paper in front of me, somebody else saying, "Just sign so we can eat, Miss Shireen." I'd tell myself I'd read it later. Then later never came. "That's why I'm going," he said, "to see what they thought they got away with." He knelt in front of me, his hands resting on my knees, just like he used to when he was little and wanted my full attention. "I need you to stay here. Don't answer any calls if you don't recognize the number. If something feels off, you go straight to the front desk and tell them you need help. I won't be gone all day." My fingers found the edge of his sleeve. "Are you sure you don't want to wait for whoever she said to call? The state people? The other offices? They'll move faster if I give them something solid," he said. "Right now, we just have pain. I want proof." That word again, proof. Like we were building a case file on our own blood. He squeezed my hand once, stood, and headed for the door. His silhouette against the motel light made my heart ache. My boy, going back into a different kind of war zone, with nothing but a phone and a list. "Thad," I called softly. He paused, his hand on the knob. "Don't let them twist your mind the way they twisted mine," I said. He looked back at me, his eyes steady. "They had time with you, Ma. They don't have that with me." The door shut behind him with a quiet click. I sat there, listening to the engine turn over outside, imagining him driving back down the same streets we'd escaped the night before. Not to be fooled again, but to gather what he needed to prove the truth that had lived in my bones long before anyone put it on paper. The house looked different in the daylight, too quiet, too neat, like it was pretending. Thaddeus had parked down the street, far enough not to draw attention, and slipped in through the side door using a key his brother never thought he'd see again. Inside, he kept his phone angled low, camera rolling. Every few seconds, he tapped to capture still photos, the papers on the counter, the shoes by the door that weren't mine, the laundry basket full of clothes that didn't belong to me. He was standing in the hallway near the back when he heard the front lock click. Voices drifted in, a man's first, deep and impatient, followed by Vanessa's sharp whisper. "Don't start yelling, Riek. You'll scare her again." "She should have been up by now," came the answer, flat and clipped, the kind of voice that expected compliance. Thaddeus stepped quietly into the kitchen doorway, half-shadowed. "Ma!" Riek called out, his tone already shifting from annoyance to suspicion. "Ma, you in here?" The silence that met him was heavy. He moved through the living room fast, eyes scanning, jaw tight. When he turned toward the kitchen, he froze. Thaddeus leaned against the counter, arms folded. "She's not here." The air changed instantly. Vanessa stopped mid-step, blinking at him like she'd seen a ghost. Riek's face went blank for half a second before tightening. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means she's safe," Thaddeus said, for the first time in a long while. Riek laughed, too loud, too forced. "Safe? You make it sound like we're criminals. Are you?" The question hit hard because it wasn't shouted. It was just placed there, steady, waiting. Riek moved closer, trying to reassert his ground. "You got no right to barge into my mother's house." "Our mother's house," Thaddeus corrected softly. "And start throwing accusations. You've been gone 5 years. You don't know what goes on here." "I know enough." Vanessa tried to slide between them, palms out. "Thad, look, this is all a misunderstanding. Your mama wanted us here. She said that before, or after. You had her cleaning up after your family." His voice stayed even, but the words were knives. Riek's nostrils flared. "Watch how you talk in my house." Thaddeus tilted his head, still recording, his thumb brushing the phone screen like it was nothing. "Funny, that's the same tone you used on her, isn't it?" A muscle twitched in Riek's cheek. "I took care of things while you were gone. That's what family does." "You mean taking over her accounts? Making her sign forms she couldn't read? That kind of care?" "You don't know what you're talking about." Riek snapped, his voice rising. "I know she was scared to call me," Thaddeus said. "I know she thought I told you to run the house this way." That landed. Vanessa's eyes darted to Riek, who looked suddenly older, heavier, his control slipping, one thread at a time. She misunderstood. I was helping. Everything I did was for her own good. Thaddeus stepped closer, their eyes level now. You convinced her of that because you sound like authority when you say it. You always did. Riek's jaw locked. He lowered his voice, leaning in until it was almost a growl. You don't understand how these things work. There are procedures. She needed oversight. You weren't here. I was. Somebody had to keep things orderly. There it was again. That cool, confident cadence, the one he used at work. The way he wrapped control in logic, pressure in politeness. Thaddeus didn't move. That's not order, he said. That's manipulation dressed like help. For a moment, the room was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator. Then Riek straightened, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. You've been away too long. You don't remember how your mama gets. She worries herself into bad choices. She told me you preferred it this way. Thaddeus blinked once, slow. What way? Riek's answer came too fast. With me handling everything. The words hung there, and even Vanessa's breath caught to how easily he'd said them. Thaddeus looked down at his phone, then back up with a calm that cut through the room. Say that again. Riek frowned. What? You said she told you I wanted things this way. Go ahead. Repeat it. Vanessa took a small step back. Riek's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Thaddeus's phone light blinked once in his hand, catching the reflection in his brother's eyes. And that's when Riek realized the red light on the phone wasn't a glare. It was recording. I didn't find out what happened when my boys finally faced each other in that house until later. That afternoon, it was just me and the motel clock. The minutes sounded loud, dropping heavy into the room while I sat on the edge of the bed, hands twisted together, praying without moving my lips. When Thaddeus came back, he didn't speak right away. He closed the door behind him, locked it, checked it twice, then set his phone gently on the table like it was carrying something fragile. Ma, he said quietly, you need to hear this. He tapped the screen, and my own living room came spilling out of that little speaker. I heard Riek's voice first, tight, suspicious. Ma, you in here? Silence. Then Thaddeus's voice, calm as a flat line. She's not here. I closed my eyes. Even in the recording, you could hear the air shift, Vanessa's quick breath, Riek's steps crossing the floor. What's that supposed to mean? Riek asked. It means she's safe, Thaddeus answered. For the first time in a long while. There was a beat of quiet and then Riek laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. Safe? You make it sound like we're criminals. Little brother. The way he said little brother, like it was a chain he could yank. I listened to my son hold his ground. No shouting, just statements that landed harder than any raised voice. He talked about the cleaning, the papers, the way I'd been kept from calling. Every word was another curtain pulled back. Then I heard it, that slight hitch in Riek's breathing when he realized the red light he'd been staring at wasn't just a glare. What you doing with that phone? He snapped. Thaddeus's answer was simple. Documenting. Chairs scraped. Someone's shoe hit the table. You could feel the panic building on their side of the room. That's illegal. Vanessa's voice cut in. You can't record people without. I'm in my mother's house, Thaddeus said, talking about my mother's treatment. Are you sure you want to argue about who has the right to be here? That's when Riek's tone changed. I'd heard that tone before, in stories he told about work, the one he used when he wanted to shut someone down. You know what? He said, his voice flattening out. We're not doing this. A soft thump, like fabric being moved. Thaddeus paused the recording and looked at me. This is where he stepped closer, he said. You remember that little leather case he carries on his belt? I nodded. I'd seen it 100 times. Never feared it until that moment. He pulled it out, Thaddeus said, then hit play again. The sound of the snap echoed through the speaker. Then Riek's voice, low and official. Sergeant Holloman, he said, as if they'd never shared a bedroom growing up. I'm telling you right now, you're interfering with the care of a vulnerable adult and disrupting a lawful living arrangement. Put the phone down. He was using woke words now. Care. Lawful. Interfering. Words that made regular folks back up, whether they were right or wrong. Thaddeus's reply was steady. A vulnerable adult you've been exploiting, he said. An arrangement you put in place by lying in my name. You don't want to do this, Riek warned. I can call this in. Have you removed? Trespassing, harassment. Hell, I could tell them you took her somewhere against her will. My stomach dropped. Just like that. My own child's safety was being dangled over a story my other child might tell. You really going to stand there, Thaddeus said, and try to arrest me in my mother's house for taking her out of a situation you created? You're not listening. Riek snapped. The badge must have been in his hand. I could hear it click against something. This isn't about you and your feelings. This is about protocols, elder protection, oversight. You don't just snatch someone under care and run off with them. Under care. That's what he called it. Thaddeus hit pause again and looked at me. He kept saying that. He murmured, like you were a case file and not his mother. He pressed play. I'm giving you a chance, Riek said. Hand over the phone. Walk out. Let me straighten this out with Ma when she gets back. You go on back to your base. Keep your record clean. Oh. He let the words stretch, a chilling silence. I could picture the look on his face, the one he used to give kids in the neighborhood when they play their music too loud. Oh. Thaddeus asked. Why start this on paper? Riek said. And once it's on paper, little brother, it don't go away. You think they won't believe me over you? I wear this badge for a reason. The room on the recording went quiet. I could hear my own heartbeat rushing in my ears, even though it was just a memory. Then my son's voice came through, calm in a way that made the hair on my arm stand up. Go ahead, he said, put it on paper. And while you're at it, Thaddeus added, put on record exactly how long you've been using that badge to keep our mother under your thumb. The knock on the motel door wasn't loud, but it went straight through my chest. It wasn't housekeeping. They knock quick and keep moving. This one was steady, patient, like whoever was on the other side already knew they weren't leaving without being let in. Thaddeus checked the peephole first, his shoulders tightening. Then he opened the door just enough to see, then wider to let them in. Mrs. Hollowman, the woman asked, stepping inside. She didn't look like how I imagined help would look. No cape, no soft church smile, just a neat blouse, a worn leather bag, and eyes that had seen too much wrong done to people who looked like me. Behind her came a man in a plain suit. No swagger, no big introduction. He closed the door quietly, glanced around the room, then nodded once, like he'd just confirmed something he already suspected. I'm Miss Carver, the woman said. I'm with Adult Protective Services. She held up a badge, nothing flashy. This is Mr. Lang from the state's Elder Justice Unit. Elder Justice. The words felt too big for our small room. We were contacted by Base Legal about your situation, the man said. His voice was calm, not kind, not cold, just steady. They forwarded some concerns and a recording your son provided. My eyes flicked to Thaddeus's phone on the table. He had sent that conversation to people I would never meet. And those people had sent these two to me. The chain of it made my head swim. May we sit, Mrs. Hollowman? Carver asked. She didn't assume. That mattered. I nodded, feeling suddenly very aware of the wrinkles in my dress, the way my hands wouldn't stop fidgeting. Thaddeus pulled the chair out for her. Mr. Lang took the other seat. My son remained standing, leaning against the wall near the door, arms loosely folded, but ready. Feist, Mrs. Hollowman, Miss Carver said, looking straight at me. I want you to know you did the right thing leaving that house with your son. You are not in trouble. The words hit something sore and secret in me. I didn't realize I'd been bracing for blame until my shoulders dropped an inch. It don't feel like I did right, I admitted. Feels like I set a match to my own family. You didn't light the fire, Mr. Lang said. We're just here to see who's been pouring the gasoline. He opened a small notebook and clicked his pen. No rush. We're going to ask you some questions. Some of them you've probably already answered for your son. I'm going to ask you to answer them again anyway. Consistency helps us. You take your time. So, I did. I talked. Not in big speeches, just in the small pieces they asked for. How long since your husband passed? About a year and some months, I said. It got worse after the funeral food stopped coming. When did your elder son begin visiting more frequently? Right after. He said he didn't want me alone too much. Did he ever tell you not to contact your younger son? He never said the words, don't call, I answered. He just always had a reason why it wasn't the right time. His overseas. You'll worry him. Let me filter things first. It added up. They didn't flinch or act surprised. They just wrote, "Who first suggested your daughter-in-law's family move into your home?" "Rick," I said. Saying his name in here felt different, like putting it on a piece of paper. Said they were between places. Said it would help me not feel so alone. Did you feel you could say no? I thought about that. I felt like if I did, I'd be the bad guy. Ungrateful. He got this way of making you feel foolish for not agreeing. Miss Carver nodded like she'd heard that exact thing before. Did you ever tell him you were uncomfortable with the arrangement? Yes, I said. More than once. What was his response? Sometimes he'd pout. Sometimes he'd sigh and say, I was doing the most. But mostly he'd bring up my youngest. Say, you know, Thad don't want you rattling around this big house by yourself. This is how he'd do it if he was here. Mr. Lang's pen stilled. He invoked your youngest son repeatedly as justification. He wore his name like a uniform, I said quietly. Made it sound like this was all my baby's idea. They exchanged a look, brief, professional, connecting dots I couldn't see. Your son mentioned documents, Mr. Lang said. Papers you were asked to sign. Do you recall what they were? Not exactly, I said, shame crawling up my neck. Bills, insurance things. At least that's what they told me. He'd talk fast, flip pages, point where to sign. If I slowed down, he'd remind me how busy he was, how he was late for his shift. I stopped asking questions after a while. Did you understand that some of those documents might have affected ownership of your home or access to your finances? I swallowed hard. Not then. Miss Carver leaned forward slightly. Do you feel you were pressured to sign? That saying no wasn't really an option. Yes, I whispered, saying it made my chest hurt. Yes. Mr. Lang glanced at Thaddeus. We've reviewed portions of your recording, he said. Combined with what your mother's told us, there is enough concern to move forward. Move forward how? I asked, my voice small. We'll need to see the house, he said. Speak to everyone living there. Compare what they say to what we already have. He closed his notebook gently. But I need to ask you something first. I met his eyes, feeling suddenly like a child called to the front of a church. When we walk into that house today, he said, steady and clear, are you ready to stand on the side of what happened to you, even if the person we'll hold accountable is your own son? When we pulled up to my house this time, I didn't sit in the passenger seat like someone being dropped off. I was in the back, between Miss Carver and my own hammering heartbeat, while Mr. Lang rode up front with Thaddeus. We didn't talk much. The kind of quiet that came with us wasn't weakness. It was preparation. My front porch looked smaller with a state car parked at the curb. Same flower pots, same doormat, different energy. Vanessa opened the door with an attitude already loaded on her face, but it melted when she saw who was on my side. Her eyes did a quick sweep. Me, my son, the woman with the badge, the man with a notebook. What's all this? She demanded. You bringing strangers to our door now? Our door. I repeated softly. The word tasted wrong coming from her. Miss Carver spoke before Thaddeus could. Good afternoon. I'm with Adult Protective Services. This is Mr. Lang, State Elder Justice Unit. We're here to follow up on a report regarding Mrs. Hollowman's care and living situation. The way she said care made it clear she was not impressed with what she'd heard so far. Vanessa tried to laugh it off. Care? Oh Lord. Shireen, what have you been telling them? We've been helping you. Mr. Lang stepped forward, polite but firm. We'll need to speak with everyone who's been living here, he said, separately. You could see the fight start behind her eyes. You can't just... Yes, he said calmly. We can, and we will. Inside, the house smelled of fried food and air freshener, familiar and foreign at the same time. Her mother and brother were at the dining table. They went stiff when they saw the badges, chairs scraping as if they'd been caught mid-bite of something they weren't supposed to have. We're conducting a welfare check and preliminary inquiry, Miss Carver explained. No one is under arrest at this moment. We just need to ask some questions and clarify a few things. At this moment, those 3 words sat there like a warning. They put me on the couch, the one I'd once picked out with my husband, now holding the weight of everything that had happened since. Thaddeus sat close enough that our shoulders almost touched. Miss Carver stayed with us while Mr. Lang took the others, one by one, to the kitchen. The door was open, voices low, but clear enough for us to catch bits and pieces. Who pays the utilities? How long have you been sleeping here regularly? Did you ever contribute to the mortgage? Each answer was another line on some invisible ledger. When it was Vanessa's turn, she rolled her eyes, but went anyway. I watched her walk down the hallway like she was headed to a performance she'd rehearsed in her head. She'd always been good with words, soft ones for company, sharp ones for me. At first, her voice was smooth. We moved in to help, she insisted. She's like a mother to me. Then Mr. Lang must have put something on the table, because the tone shifted. Her words started coming out thinner. That's my signature, but I didn't. No, he handled most of that. My chest tightened. I reached for Thaddeus's hand without thinking. He laced his fingers through mine, his eyes steady on the hallway. Miss Carver watched too, her expression unreadable. This is usually how it goes, she murmured quietly. The story sounds one way until they realize we're looking at paper, not just faces. A minute later, we heard a chair scrape loud against the kitchen floor. Then Vanessa's voice, higher now, the polish gone. He said it was covered. He said nobody would trace it back like that. Trace. Covered. Words that did not belong in a righteous story. Mr. Lang called out, Mrs. Hollowman, would you mind coming in for a moment? My legs felt like they weren't part of me, but I stood. Thaddeus moved with me, solid and quiet. In the kitchen, the table was spread with copies, printouts of bank activity, property records I'd never seen, and a still frame from the recording where Riek had his badge half out, mouth caught mid-threat. Vanessa's face was blotchy, mascara smudged in the corners of her eyes. Her hands twisted a napkin into a tight rope. Ma, she started, reaching out like we were still on those terms. You know, I never meant to. Mr. Lang lifted a hand. We're going to keep this focused, he said. He tapped one of the pages. We've confirmed that funds were moved from accounts in your name into an account controlled by your eldest son, with your daughter-in-law as a secondary beneficiary. We also have evidence of your home's title being adjusted on paper despite no legitimate sale or clear consent. She flinched. That was his idea, she blurted. He said it was just positioning. He told me it was smart. For the future. For whose future? Miss Carver asked gently. Vanessa's gaze dropped to the table. Ours, she whispered. Mine and his. The room went very quiet. Even the refrigerator seemed to hum softer. He told me, she rushed on, your son didn't really value you, not like he did. He said you were old-fashioned, stuck in grief, that somebody had to step in and keep the house from going to waste. He said if we did what he planned, there'd be enough money for all of us. That your husband hadn't used the house right, that we would. My throat burned, and scrubbing floors was part of that plan. I managed. Her eyes filled, tears spilling over now without permission. I didn't start it that way, she said. At first, it was just, help your mother keep up. Then he'd joke in front of his people about you needing something to do. Then his mama would ask you to bring this, clean that. If I said anything, he'd say, she's fine. She likes it. She's from that generation. She swallowed hard. He told me to make sure you stayed dependent so the paperwork wouldn't be questioned. Said, if you looked like you couldn't manage, nobody would doubt you needed oversight. Coercion, Mr. Lang said quietly to his notes. The words sat heavy in the kitchen. And the two of you? Thaddeus asked, his voice low but sharp. How long has that been going on? She broke. Whatever thin pride she'd been hanging on to crumbled. She pressed the napkin to her face, her shoulders shaking. Since the second year you were gone, she choked. He said you didn't have to know. He said you'd moved on. He said. She looked up, eyes red, and the last sentence came out like a confession and an accusation all at once. He said you were just a paycheck waiting to be redirected. I'd always thought a signature was a small thing, just ink and habit. You signed for packages, 4 checks, 4 school slips. You sign because people put paper in front of you and expect your hand to move. I didn't understand a person could take your whole life and hide it inside one crooked line. Mr. Lang laid more pages on the table. This time he slid his notebook aside, making space with a care that made my stomach tighten. The room was fuller now. Her family pushed back against the walls. Miss Carver was at my shoulder, Thaddeus standing just behind me like a second spine. We've pulled the most recent filings connected to this address, Mr. Lang said. Some are routine, some are not. On top was a copy of something with a lot of small print and the county seal at the bottom. My name was near the middle in ink that looked like mine, but leaned funny at the end. Mrs. Hollowman, he said, tapping that wobbled line. Do you remember signing this? I leaned in. The words blurred at first. He didn't rush me. I remember, I said slowly. A stack one day. He said the city needed to update their records after your daddy passed. I was so tired that week. Who handed you the pen? Miss Carver asked. Rick, I murmured. He said if I didn't get the papers back quick, they'd fine me. Thaddeus's hand tightened on the back of my chair. Mr. Lang flipped the page up just enough to show the title at the top. This is a deed transfer request, he said. It reclassifies your home from solely in your name to joint with your eldest son. Within 6 months, another version lists him as primary. The room tilted. He never said that, I whispered. He said it was just paperwork for widows. Did he explain you were giving up majority control of the house? He used words like protection and efficiency. I said, heat climbing my neck. Not give up. Never those. From the doorway came a voice I knew too well. You're twisting this. Riek stood there in his work pants and department polo, badge clipped at his hip instead of in that little case. He must have come in through the back. Nobody heard the door over all that paper. His eyes swept the table. Then my face. Then Thaddeus. You brought state people into my mother's house, he said, his tone almost amused. You really trying to make a scene? Mr. Lang didn't stand. He just turned his head in a slow, deliberate way. Officer Hollowman, I presume, he said. We were about to call and request your presence. Saves us a step. Riek's jaw flexed. You had no right to pull my mother into this mess. She doesn't understand half of what you are saying. I understand enough, I said. The sound of my own voice surprised me. I understand you told me I was signing one thing and they're saying it was something else. He looked at me then. Really looked. And for a moment, I saw panic slip through that professional calm. Ma, you know I would never do anything to hurt you. Those papers were to streamline things. If something happened to you. Something already did, I cut in. It happened the day you stopped talking to me like your mother and started talking to me like a problem. Mr. Lang slid another page out. Bank letterhead this time. Joint account authorization, he read. Funds moved in round numbers to a secondary account under your name, with your sons as co-owner. Later modifications list your daughter-in-law as an authorized user. He angled it so I could see the signature again, my name, but the pen stroke uneven, like my hand had been pushed to keep up. Did you intend to give them that access? He asked. No, I said, the word shaking. No. Riek stepped forward, hands spread like he could smooth the table flat. She doesn't remember all the conversations we had, he said quickly. She was overwhelmed. I walked her through every decision. Did you ever tell her she could say no? Miss Carver asked. He blinked. That's not how this works. You'll know the law. An elder in her situation needs structure. She needed someone to keep track of things. I'm that someone. Always have been. You're not answering the question, Mr. Lang said. His voice stayed calm, but the air around his words felt sharper. Did you tell her she had the choice not to sign? Riek's gaze flicked to the badges, then to Thaddeus, then back to me. I told her what was best, he snapped. She's never been good with paperwork. You ask her, she'll tell you. They both looked at me. My throat felt dry as dust. Memories rose, his pen tapping, his watch glancing, his sigh when I hesitated. The way he'd say, Ma, stop making this harder than it has to be. He didn't put it like a choice, I said. He put it like a warning. Mr. Lang nodded once, wrote something down, then set his pen aside. That's the difference, he said. Assistance versus coercion. For the first time since he walked in, Riek's control cracked. You're not about to sit here and label me some kind of predator, he said, his voice rising. I'm the one who stepped up while he was gone. He jabbed a finger toward Thaddeus. I kept this house from falling apart. I kept her from being scammed. I used my position to protect her. Your position gave you leverage, Mr. Lang replied. What you did with that leverage is what we're interested in. Miss Carver turned to me again, her tone gentle but precise. Just so we're clear for the record, if your son had told you these forms would put your house and money largely under his control, would you have signed them? The answer came out of me before I could soften it. No. Riek's head jerked like someone had hit him. And in that small, shaking word, he heard what the rest of us already understood. His control over my life had just been put in writing, but not the way he planned. I always thought if I ever saw one of my children in handcuffs, I would scream, rip my clothes, fall out on the floor like the women you see on the news. I didn't do any of that. When it finally happened, the room was too quiet for theatrics. It felt less like a scene and more like paperwork catching up. My nose was still hanging in the air when someone knocked twice on the open front door. 2 uniformed officers stepped in, worn navy, not the color my son wore to work. Behind them came another man in a plain shirt with a badge clipped at his belt, but not from our town. Miss Carver glanced at Mr. Lang, then moved slightly to the side, giving them space. They'd been expecting this. I realized then that move forward in their language meant more people at my door. Afternoon, the lead officer said. He didn't raise his voice or puff his chest. He just looked around the room, taking in the table, the papers, my face, Riek standing stiff with anger. Which one of you is Officer Hollowman? Riek straightened by instinct. I am, he said. What's this about? The man with the badge at his belt answered. I'm with the state's Criminal Investigations Division, he said. We've been briefed by APS and Elder Justice on a preliminary finding of financial exploitation and abuse of a vulnerable adult. We're here to execute a temporary suspension of your authority and take you in for questioning. The word exploitation made my skin crawl. Riek laughed, but the sound came out brittle. You're kidding. Based on what? Some story she told after running off. She's confused. They all know that. The investigator didn't argue. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded document. This is a suspension notice, he said calmly. Effective immediately. You are relieved of duty pending investigation. We have probable cause, based on recorded statements and documentation, to believe you used your position to pressure your mother into signing over property and financial control without informed consent. That's not how it happened. Riek snapped. You're getting one side. Thaddeus shifted his weight behind me, not moving forward, but not backing away either. His eyes were on the badge at his brother's hip. Sir, the uniformed officer said, I'm going to need your weapon and your shield. For the first time since they walked in, something like fear flashed across Riek's face. Tiny, quick, but there. His hand hovered near his holster, hesitation hanging in the air. Don't make this harder, the officer added, still calm. You know how this goes. Slowly, Riek unhooked his gun, cleared it, and placed it on the table. Then, he unclipped the badge from his belt. I'd watched that badge go on for years. Before shifts, before funerals, before long nights. Seeing it now, lying next to the papers that proved what he'd been doing with my name, felt like 2 lives stacked on top of each other. You're making a mistake, he muttered. All of you. The investigator nodded slightly. If that's true, you'll have every opportunity to say so with counsel present at the station. He gestured toward the doorway. For now, turn around, please. Handcuffs. Riek scoffed. Really? It's standard, the officer said. You know that, too. He turned. The metal clicked around his wrists. Not loud, but final. I didn't look away. I owed myself that much, to see what their choices had come to. On the other side of the room, Miss Carver turned toward Vanessa, who had been frozen in her chair since her confession spilled out. Based on what you just admitted and what we see here, you're also being taken in, she said. Financial exploitation, conspiracy, Participation in coercive control. You'll have a chance to speak with an attorney. Tay slid down Vanessa's cheeks again. I didn't plan it, she whispered. He said it was already done. He said if I just went along, we'd all be taken care of. Her mother started fussing under her breath, but the officer nearest her lifted a hand. You're being detained as well, he said. We need separate statements from everyone who's been living here as part of this arrangement. You're not under formal arrest at this time, but you will come with us. Riek tried one more angle, his head twisting toward me, shoulders squared, even with his wrists bound. Ma, he said, tell them I never laid a hand on you. Tell them I kept this house running while everyone else disappeared. My mouth opened, but no words came at first. All the years of telling myself he means well crowded up in my throat. I could feel Miss Carver's eyes on me. Thaddeus's hand hovered near my shoulder, not touching, just there. I will tell them the truth, I said finally. My voice shook, but it didn't break. That you came here after my husband died and you saw a woman who needed comfort, and then you turned that need into a leash. He stared at me like he'd never seen me before. The officers guided him toward the door. Not rough, not gentle, just doing a job. His boots stepped over the threshold he claimed like it belonged to him. As they led Vanessa out behind him, she glanced back once. There was no apology in her eyes, just a hollow sort of fear for herself. Her brother and mother followed, each escorted by an officer. No shouting, no wrestling, just a quiet line of people who thought they'd rearrange my life in secret, now walking out in the open. The house was suddenly too still. No TV, no loud laughter, no orders being tossed in my direction, just the soft sound of the front door closing behind them. I stood in the middle of my own living room, the table cluttered with evidence of what had been done in my name, and felt something loosen in my chest, a knot that had sat there so long I'd mistaken it for part of me. Thaddeus stepped closer, searching my face. Ma, he said gently, are you all right? I looked at the empty doorway where they'd just taken my oldest baby away, and let the truth settle, heavy and clear. I don't know yet, I said, but for the first time in a long time, I'm not under anybody's thumb in my own house. Paper. It saved my life the same way it almost ruined it. Same kind of table, same kind of pen. Only this time, nobody was rushing me. Nobody was sighing or tapping their watch. We were at the county building, in a room that smelled faintly of old files and copier ink. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A clerk slid a fresh stack of documents toward me, but she didn't look bored. She looked careful. Miss Carver sat on one side, Mr. Lang on the other. Thaddeus stood behind me again, his presence steady like a wall at my back. Let's go slowly, Mrs. Hollowman, Mr. Lang said, line by line. So we did. This page, he said, tapping the top one, reverses the deed transfer that was filed under coercion. It restores full ownership of the house to you alone, as it was before. I read every sentence he pointed to. It took time. My eyes blurred. Twice I had to stop and ask him to explain something in plainer words. He did. Not once did anybody make me feel small for not knowing. If you don't like how something sounds, say so, he reminded me. Nothing moves until you're comfortable. Comfortable. Nobody had used that word for me in a long time. On the second page, we addressed the bank accounts. The joint access I hadn't even understood I'd given away was being stripped back. Automatic transfers canceled. Secondary names removed. You understand, the clerk said gently. These changes put control back in your hands. No one else will be able to move money or sign on this house without your permission. In writing, with a witness who doesn't benefit from it. I felt my shoulders lift, like someone had untied a heavy apron from around my neck. Good, I said. That's how it should have been all along. When it came time to sign, I didn't just grab the pen. I sat with it for a second, feeling its weight. Then I wrote my name, slow and steady, each letter a little straighter than the last. Shireen. My hand didn't shake. After the property papers came the orders Miss Carver had mentioned back at the house. She laid them out like a shield between me and the past few months. These are protective orders, she said. They state clearly that your eldest son, your daughter-in-law, and her immediate family are not to contact you directly. No calls, No showing up. No slipping messages through neighbors. If they want to address anything, it goes through attorneys and the court system. Not even a sorry. I asked, the words heavy, not rhetorical. If an apology comes, she said, it will come with accountability attached, not pressure. I nodded. My heart knew it might never come at all, but my hands still folded over the edge of the table, like they were bracing for impact. She pointed to the line I needed to sign. This tells the court you want that distance, she said. We can't want it for you. You have to choose it. There was a time I would have hesitated, thinking about Christmases and old photos, and the baby I once rocked who now sat in a holding cell somewhere. That time had passed. I choose it, I said. Ink met paper again. This time it didn't feel like I was disappearing into somebody else's plan. It felt like I'd stepped back into my own skin. When we finished, the clerk gathered the stack with practiced hands. These will be processed and entered into the system, she said. You'll get official copies in the mail. But as of today, this is how things stand. As of today. That phrase settled over me like a new kind of weather. We stepped out into the hallway together. The building buzzed with ordinary life, people paying fines, getting licenses, arguing about parking tickets. Nobody knew that down in one of those rooms, a mother had just taken her house back. Outside, the sun felt different. Not brighter, just honest. No shadows from people standing where they didn't belong. On the sidewalk, Thaddeus walked a little slower, like he didn't want to rush whatever was happening inside me. You did good in there, Ma, he said quietly. I did what I should have done a long time ago, I replied. Read what was in front of me and believe my own unease instead of somebody else's confidence. He smiled, just a little. You believed yourself today, he said. That matters. We reached the car. He opened the door for me, then hesitated, one hand on the frame, his eyes searching my face. House is yours again, he said softly. Paper says it. Court says it. Nobody else's name's sitting on your life. A swell of emotion rose in me. Relief, grief, something like pride, all tangled together. Took losing almost everything to get back what your daddy left me, I murmured. But it's in my hands now. He nodded. Some things had to be put on record, he said. Now they are. He went around to his side, and for a brief moment, I watched him through the windshield. This grown man who'd flown back from one war to find another one waiting at home. His shoulders looked less tense now, but there was still something unfinished in his eyes. Legal papers could undo forged deeds, freeze accounts, set boundaries. They couldn't fix a marriage built on lies or brotherhood cracked down the middle. As he slid into the driver's seat, closed the door, and gripped the wheel, I realized the next set of signatures wouldn't be about me at all. They'd be about what my youngest son was ready to end for good. The next time I sat at a table with my son and a stack of papers, they weren't calling my name. They were calling his. We were at a small law office this time, not the county building. No seals on the walls, just framed certificates and a ficus that had seen too many hard conversations. Thaddeus sat to my left, shoulders squared, his wedding band still on his finger like a lie that hadn't caught up yet. His attorney, a quiet black woman with tired eyes and a steady pen, walked him through each page. This packet covers dissolution of marriage, division of assets, and your statement of grounds, she said. We're keeping it straightforward: adultery, financial betrayal, and endangerment of your mother's welfare. Endangerment of my mother's welfare. Hearing myself referred to like a risk factor almost made me laugh. Almost. Thaddeus didn't flinch. Will she see this? He asked. She'll be served, the attorney said. Her counsel will go over it with her. You won't have to. He nodded, his eyes on the words. Good. He took the pen and paused, staring at the line with his name. For a heartbeat, I saw the boy who once swore he'd never be like the men on TV, leaving families behind, breaking vows. You sure, baby? I asked softly. You don't owe me this. You don't have to pay me back by emptying your whole life. He turned his head to me, and the look in his eyes was different now. Clear, not shattered. Ma, he said, this isn't about paying you back. It's about stopping what was helping destroy you. He signed. One clean motion, no hesitation this time. The attorney gathered those pages, then opened another folder. On the criminal side, she said, the DA has filed initial charges. She slid a copy across the table for us to see. Your brother is facing counts of financial fraud, exploitation of an elderly person, coercive control, and official misconduct. Your wife is being charged with conspiracy to commit fraud and participation in the exploitation. Her family is included as co-conspirators on specific counts. The words were heavy on paper, but simpler in my mind. They were finally being called what they'd been acting like. Does that mean prison? He asked. It means a process, she replied. Hearings, plea offers, maybe a trial. Your brother's facing internal review with his department as well. Administrative leave has already started. His badge and gun are still surrendered. If half of what's on that recording holds up, he's not getting them back. I pictured my eldest in a room somewhere. No badge on his chest, no title to stand behind, just a man and his choices. What about her? I forced myself to ask. Saying her instead of her name felt like the only boundary I could manage. She's out on bond for now, the attorney said. Conditions include no contact with you or your property, and she's barred from accessing any accounts connected to you or your mother. If she violates that, the DA will use it. A strange kind of ache rose in me then. A grief, not just for the marriage he was closing, but for the version of him that believed he was coming home to a wife, waiting with open arms instead of open hands. There was a time, I said quietly, you would have taken the blame for her. Said, you should have called more, sent more, loved harder. There was a time, he agreed. But that was before I walked into my own house and found my mother on her knees. His voice didn't shake when he said it. Mine did when I heard it. Days blurred into each other after that. Calls from Mr. Lang with updates, letters stamped with case numbers, notices about hearings. I didn't go to all of them. Some things a mother's heart doesn't need to see. But I listened when Thaddeus came back and reported in that calm way he'd picked up from all this. Internal Affairs questioned him for hours. He told me one evening at the kitchen table. The house was ours again, but I still wasn't fully used to how quiet it stayed. They played the recording. They asked him why he said I wanted things that way. And what did he say? I asked. He said he misremembered, Thaddeus replied, like he just got mixed up between protecting you and controlling you. He stirred his coffee without drinking it. DA is pushing hard, he added. There's talk of a plea. Less a time if he admits to the financial stuff and the coercion, more if he fights and loses. The word time landed with more weight than any sentencing number. Time away from the life he built. Time to sit with what he'd done. And her? I asked. She's trying to flip, he said. Offer more about him to save herself. But the paper trail has both their names on it. You can't flip on ink. We sat with that. Two people who had signed our lives away in different ways, now watching paper finally move in our favor. Do you hate them? I asked after a while. He thought about it longer than I expected. I hate what they did, he said. I hate how easy they made it look to use you. But hate, that's heavy. I've carried enough heavy things. He looked around the kitchen, at the walls his daddy painted, at the table we'd eaten 100 meals at, now cleared of everyone who tried to claim it. I'm more done than hateful, he said. I nodded. That, I understood. Later that night, as we washed dishes side by side, the sink full of just our plates, I watched him for a moment. The lines around his eyes seemed deeper, but the tightness in his shoulders had eased. Thad, I said, drying a glass. Can I ask you something that's been sitting in my chest? He glanced over, one brow lifting. You can ask me anything. I set the glass down and met his eyes. If they made this whole house theirs, I said slowly, if they'd gone so far to pull you into their story, why didn't they expect you home when you came through that door? The first evening the house was truly ours again. The silence felt different. Not empty, not tense, just honest. I stood in the doorway for a long moment before stepping inside, letting the familiar shapes settle across my vision. The curve of the hallway, the framed picture of Thaddeus in his high school uniform, the scuff on the baseboard from when his daddy moved the old sofa years ago. Nothing in the house had changed, but everything in me had. Thaddeus walked a few steps behind me, not rushing, giving me space to breathe the place in. When the door clicked shut, I felt a weight slide off me so quietly it barely made a sound. I wasn't a housekeeper anymore. I wasn't a burden someone could file paperwork around. I wasn't kneeling on floors that already belonged to me. I was home. "Sit down, Ma," he murmured. "Let's just be hey." We settled at the kitchen table, the same one I'd wiped clean 1,000 times. The same one they'd sat around like it belonged to them. I laid my palm flat on the wood, feeling its warmth steady under my hand, as if the house itself was welcoming me back. For a long stretch, neither of us spoke. He poured me a cup of tea and poured one for himself, then leaned back, exhaling slow, the lines around his eyes softer than they'd been in weeks. The clock ticked above us, gentle and familiar. No raised voices, no doors slamming, no footsteps waiting to intimidate, just two people sitting inside something that was supposed to be theirs all along. "You know," he said quietly, rubbing his thumb along the handle of his mug. "I used to picture this moment while I was deployed. Not the mess, not the pain, just you and me at this table, safe, talking, knowing we weren't carrying anybody else's weight." I swallowed past the lump in my throat. I didn't think I'd see this again, I admitted. There were nights I told myself the house didn't need me anymore, that maybe it had already moved on to somebody else's life. His head lifted sharply. "Ma, the house never moved on. People just tried to take over because they saw you grieving and alone." I traced the grain in the wood slowly, letting his words settle. "Grief makes you smaller," I whispered. "Quieter, easier to move around." He didn't argue. He just reached out and covered my hand with his, warm and steady. "You're not small," he said. "You were never small. You were tired." And they used that. A soft hum rose from the refrigerator, the same sound it had always made. But tonight, it felt like part of the healing. Familiar, grounded, dependable. "Do you think everything will go back to normal now?" I asked him, not hoping, just wondering. He shook his head gently. "No, not normal. Better. Different. Honest." That answer loosened something inside me. I didn't want the old normal, the one where I said yes too easily and ignored the tightening in my chest when a pen was pushed toward my hand. I wanted this room to breathe, room to choose, room to stand. "You planning on staying here a while?" I asked, a small smile tugging at my mouth. "Ma," he said, grinning back, "I'm not leaving you in this house alone after all that. I'll take the guest room for now. We'll figure out the rest together." Together. That word fit in the room like it belonged to the walls. We spent the next hour talking, not about the court dates, not about his divorce, not about his brother sitting somewhere waiting for consequences, just real things, the way the backyard plum tree had overgrown, the squeak the hallway light still made when it flicked on, the meals we hadn't cooked together in years. At one point, he stood and began checking cabinets, opening drawers, straightening things with a kind of quiet protectiveness I hadn't seen since he was a teenager helping his father fix the porch steps. "You don't have to do all that tonight," I said gently. He looked over his shoulder. "I know. I just want to make sure everything that's yours feels like it again." I watched him work. No tension, no rush, just care. And realized healing didn't always come through big moments. Sometimes it came in the soft closing of a kitchen drawer, in the tea growing lukewarm between your palms, in the quiet presence of someone who came home in time to stop you from losing yourself completely. When he finally sat down again, the sun had dipped low, painting the room in a soft amber tone that felt like forgiveness. "You home for real now?" he asked. I nodded, tears warming my eyes but not falling. "For real," I said. "And this time, I'm staying on my feet." He smiled. The same boy, the same man, all at once. And in that quiet kitchen, with the last light slipping across our table, it felt like the house, our house, finally exhaled with me. What about you? Have you ever had to fight to reclaim something you thought was already yours? Or had someone step up for you in an unexpected way? Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. I really want to know.